Every living thing on this planet has had to adapt in order to thrive. Whether it's driven by the environment, competition, or a threat, to survive is to evolve. This is the case for businesses too. They develop and they embrace new technologies so that they can be more efficient, profitable, and gain a competitive advantage. But whether it's stealing passwords via punch cards or mailing malicious software on a floppy disk, criminals have always looked for ways to exploit these evolving systems for their own benefit. In the early 21st century, an enticing target for criminals was sitting right inside everyone's wallets.
We saw breaches where threat actors essentially sat in parking lots and pointed antennas at retail stores and captured unencrypted credit card numbers. You could try to use the credit card numbers that you stole to buy goods, but realistically, you're only getting a few $1,000s worth of value. But if you think about how that actually worked, the adversary only had the ability to steal credit card numbers that were traversing from that particular store. And you've got to steal a lot of credit card numbers over a long period of time, and it's not really easy to make $1 million.
One thing that keeps coming up over and over again is that sometimes these alerts actually are known. The company might have known something was happening, but either ignored the alert, mischaracterized it, or didn't prioritize it.
In 2013, credentials stolen from a third-party vendor provided access to Target's network, where malware could be installed on point-of-sale systems. Through this, cybercriminals were able to steal the credit card information of over 70 million customers.
It was one of the most notable credit card theft events in the United States.
And so what do they do with them? That's when they turn to what is commonly referred to as card shops. And these are shops that were specifically specialized in just selling stolen payment card data. And these costs, in some cases, just a couple dollars.
There was a significant amount of consumer trust that was lost because of these security events. A lot of folks were scared to shop at these stores. And so a lot of these merchants that dealt with these security events essentially had to do a few things. One, they had to figure out how their environment was compromised. Two, they had to secure their environment to stop the bleeding, to ensure that they didn't continue to lose credit card data. And the third thing they had to do is really tighten up their security controls such that it became incredibly hard for a threat actor to re-compromise their environment.
Really having a good program for how those alerts are triaged can go a long way.
We saw significant security transformation work being performed by a number of these victim organizations.
They really had to evolve and adopt new technology. And that's when we see chip and PIN cards become really popular. At the end of 2015, there was a liability shift for retailers and financial institutions. Whichever one wasn't complying with this new technology, they would be on the hook for any losses. And so we saw a sharp increase in the number of organizations across the US that had adopted this technology. And that caused a strain on threat actors, right? They were no longer able to break into these companies and steal large volumes of data anymore.
But the nature of evolution is to react and adapt to new challenges.
When we start to see payment card intrusions go down, we also start to see a really small scale operation around ransom attacks.
It looked very different than what organizations see today. We were essentially seeing situations where a threat actor tricked somebody into installing software on their computer.
And what you would see as the victim is actually just this message that says, please pay me now. You must do it within the next 24 hours or else I'm going to delete all of the files off of your system.
And the amounts were quite small, $50 or $100 or maybe $500 or so. What changed over the years is we started seeing threat actors understand the organizations that they broke into. And one of the first groups to really perform targeted ransomware deployment was a group called SamSam.
They were not mass distributing ransomware to individuals like me and you. They were actually breaking into companies, moving throughout those networks, and then attempting to deploy ransomware on as many machines as they could.
As an organization who receives one of these extortion notes or one of these ransom notes from an external party, thoughts start running through your mind of the reputational damage to your company, the regulatory damage that might occur, and it becomes a very big issue and a very big incident for an organization very quickly.
they started increasing their demands. They started going to the high six-figure extortion demands. And then something that substantially changed at the end of 2019 was a group called Maze ended up conducting what we call multifaceted extortion.
They're already in these networks. They already have experience stealing data. Why don't we just steal what else we can find in these victim networks? And so that's what we started to see happen. And they basically said, hey, if you don't pay us, we're gonna release this data publicly on this forum. And that's what we saw them do. That victim didn't pay, they released the data. Since Maze really invented this kind of approach, we saw other threat actors adopt the same approach. And as of today, there's more than 150 of these different data shaming websites to publicize breaches and to post data that they steal from victims.
No longer were people just paying to recover their business operations, but they were paying for a promise for this stolen data to not show up on the internet.
We're now at a time where we have threat actors commonly demanding over $1 million from a single victim company. And financial institutions had gotten really great at combating fraud. Like, that is something that they had been experiencing for years. And so you see cybercriminals start to rapidly adopt cryptocurrency. And instead of demanding payments for ransom in the form of prepaid money cards, they're demanding payment in Bitcoin instead.
These ransoms started out with a few $1,000s in Bitcoin, but now we've seen upwards of $50 million in a single ransomware or extortion incident.
That gave threat actors another way to be able to receive payments from their victims that was a lot more untraceable.
It also changed the nature of who is a victim. Because if cryptocurrency and getting it and extorting organizations is the goal, that means that really anybody can be a victim of cybercrime in this new era.
Anybody, including a company that provides oil and gas to a huge portion of the eastern seaboard.
Breaking news as one of the nation's largest pipelines has shut down due to a potential cyber attack.
The security event against Colonial Pipeline was game-changing for one main reason. It's because everyday Americans finally saw a physical consequence to a cyber attack. Everybody needs gas, and everybody started to notice that the lines at the gas stations were getting longer. The price of gas went up. I distinctly remember the Friday in which we got a call from Colonial Pipeline. They didn't exactly know what was going on, and they didn't know what the potential consequences of the cyber attack could have been. And over the course of several days, we had to collectively work with Colonial Pipeline to figure out, how did the adversary get into the network? What do they do? How far do they get? What changes do they make? What backdoors do they deploy? We scoped out the incident, we contained it, and we eradicated the threat actor. So the threat actor behind the Colonial Pipeline incident is a group that called themselves DarkSide. I don't believe that DarkSide truly understood how significant of a company Colonial Pipeline was.
Now, while the attack on Colonial Pipeline may have been mostly opportunistic, other cybercriminals were conducting more specialized, intentionally malicious attacks.
In October 2020, we identified an acute attack against the healthcare system in the United States. A threat actor that we named Fin12, very deliberately targeting a few dozen healthcare organizations. They deployed an encryptor that essentially made the hospital unable to provide care to patients. And just imagine a situation where your care is delayed by hours or potentially days. It was terrible. It was one of the most significant cyber events that we've ever dealt with. A lot of threat actors, they declared that they would never hit a hospital. But Fin12 decided to do that. And they decided that harming individuals was worth the extortion payments that they were getting.
These sorts of highly damaging attacks require multiple skill sets. Naturally, people have begun to specialize and fill niches, giving threat actors the ability to design their approaches with increasing complexity.
And so we really kind of saw ransomware evolve into really this broader extortion machine.
And we're tracking the system of systems that these criminals are using in the underground to really carry out their schemes.
So you might see something like 10 to 30% of whatever that ransom is paid in the end go to that initial access broker. Those are going to be people that are really good at infecting those initial machines. So they'll send spam emails, they'll use exploits, and they'll distribute malware, and that's kind of where they'll stop. And then you might have another 20 to 30% that actually goes to that ransomware developer or service operator. And then the remaining amount would go to that intrusion operator. And these are the people that know how to move throughout a network. They know how to escalate privileges at an organization. There were a lot of different ways effectively that those threat actors kind of developed and expanded their ransomware as a service offering beyond just providing a piece of malware itself.
So, now you have a multifaceted, multidisciplined industry that's becoming as sophisticated as any other modern business. While some groups were getting increasingly organized and structured, another threat actor was taking a completely different approach.
They got increasingly more aggressive, let's say. A great example of this is when we look at the actors that are commonly known in the public as Scattered Spider.
They operate in a very different way than what traditional espionage groups or criminal groups had operated.
The threat actors have conducted phone calls to victim organizations or victims' families. They've sent text messages to them.
We see threat actors deliberately reaching out to journalists saying that they've hacked into a particular company and they hope that journalist will write a story. They didn't care if they got caught in a network. They weren't trying to be quiet. They actually did a lot of things that were deliberately loud and noisy. We saw them do a lot of disruptive things where they shut down parts of the network, shut down certain systems, made changes to people's display names. They weren't just motivated by money. It really changes the whole dynamic around paying extortion payments.
Some of these extortion events are getting really personal, and leaders need to be able to exercise that type of scenario before they meet it for the first time in reality.
Everybody is a target now. It doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter what country you are in. This is an attack that can work against you.
But what's the next big evolutionary step for this industry?
We know that threat actors are using AI to experiment right now.
What is fact and what is fiction becomes harder to tell. Is this legitimate? Do they actually have these pictures of me?
But what's more exciting is what defenders are doing with AI.
At Google, we've been using AI for many years as a source of good and as a force multiplier.
We're using it to help look through source code and identify security vulnerabilities. And we can do it at a faster rate than which the adversaries can do.
We're going to continue to advance the capabilities that we have there, and we're going to be able to continue to make those capabilities available to our customers and to our users.
The Google Threat Intelligence Group relentlessly defends Google, its users, and customers by building the most comprehensive threat picture to disrupt adversaries. We're really committed to making sure that not only Google is safe, but those organizations that depend on us, as well as the entire global security community. But we still have to be vigilant because we know threat actors continue to get better and better at using AI as a tool.